From the beginning of time, God has always chosen those who seem the weakest.
I think when we first think about God coming into our lives, we think of it as oftentimes a moment, right? Where the clouds open up, where the angels sing, and a light shines down upon us.
In reality, the Lord is always trying to speak to us, but He chooses to speak to us often in the quiet, in the movement of our hearts, in something we read in a book, in a word that a friend says to us.
He's the one that helps us to understand and open a whole new avenue. And it's always when it happens when we least expect it.
When I think about the ways of God, the way God thinks, I think of what Paul said when he said, God's weakness is stronger and His wisdom is wiser. Now, what does he mean? I think of the story of David. David was this youngest son. He had a bunch of brothers. And Samuel the prophet came to town because God told him to choose a king. And David's dad called all the older brothers, all the apparently strong ones and wise ones, for Samuel to choose from, but Samuel didn't want any of those. He wanted David, the kid, the little one out in the field. And he called him forth, and he anointed him, the unlikely one, the weak one, and made him king.
In the Old Testament, one of my favorite stories is about this commander in an army, Naaman. Naaman is a commander for Syria, but he has leprosy. And so he hears about this prophet from Israel, one of God's prophets, and he's expecting to have to do something great, some awesome work, defeat some horrible enemy. Elisha told him to bathe 7 times in this small little river. At first, Naaman is insulted. He thinks there are greater rivers in Damascus. Why, since I'm such a high figure, should I have to humble myself to go do this? But his servant comes up to him and says, if they'd asked you to do something amazing, you would have done it. Why not do something simple?
You see this story again and again throughout Jewish history. You see it in the story of Christianity itself. You see Mary, this peasant girl, chosen by God. Gabriel goes to her, and she becomes the mother of Jesus.
And how does our Lord Jesus Christ come into the world? He doesn't come by some host of armies and of angels or anything like that. He comes in the silence, He comes in the night, and He comes in this helpless little baby infant in some backwater place in the Middle East.
Christ Himself was an apparent political failure. He was crucified, He was killed as a common criminal. But it's through His death, which He, in John's Gospel, called His glory, chose to show the world what true love is.
He lives for 30 years of His life hidden from where everyone's vision, where no one can see Him. And then when He comes to conquer sin and death, to lay waste to evil, He does so by dying in weakness on the cross.
That means that He could have done it any way that He wanted. He could have conquered the world. If I would have wanted to save the world, I'd conquer it and then put it under my rule. But no, He humbles Himself in His humanity, and then He offers His body and blood for each and every single one of us. That's love.
Because there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. And that's what He calls each and every one of us, His friends, and He gives us new life by laying down His own.
If you look at the history of Christianity, it's full of saints with spectacularly scandalous pasts.
We could probably say that Paul was the most unexpected apostle. Not someone who followed Jesus when He was alive, but in fact, someone who persecuted Christians in the early days of the church. We know the story of Paul, who was on his way to Damascus, but then was struck and saw a vision of the risen Christ, and had this deep conversion of heart to realize that in persecuting Christians, he was actually persecuting Jesus. And so Paul becomes the one who most loudly and effectively proclaimed the gospel.
God chooses those the world would not choose. And He makes them saints. He makes them agents of God's power.
I think it's pretty safe to say that our Lord, throughout history, has shown up in scriptures and in our daily lives.
This is a call to be ready for Christ to work in your life in an unexpected way, for Him to walk into your life and to call you to go deeper.
C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Reality, in fact, is usually something you could not have guessed. That is one of the reasons I believe in Christianity. It is a religion you could not have guessed."